Hello, we are Alpha Team, and it is our pleasure to introduce to you Shifter Off the Grid, which is a third-person stealth game designed for consoles. Let's dive into it. The game begins with the main character, which is a 35-year-old man with long hair and athletic build, as he falls through a tunnel of light and suddenly appears on the rooftop of a skyscraper with the sound of a mysterious woman telling him to run and jump off the edge of the roof. As the player explores the rooftop while trying to understand where to take the running leap, the woman starts telling the player of a highly sophisticated surveillance AI called the Grid that has mapped all citizens in the city by using their DNA. This system is controlling society's every move through security cameras, drones, and a police force, and it will be the main character's job to ultimately destroy the Grid and free society from its oppression. The player runs off the rooftop and crashes into the window of the next building over. He activates his visor, which will project a map of the area indicating nearby enemy units and objectives and sub-objectives for him to accomplish. The player sees the central mainframe of the Grid and approaches it. There, he will be introduced with two mechanics of the game called stealth hiding and sneak grab, as he faces one of the agents that will try to stop his attempt to destroy the Grid. He will ultimately fail, and the player will be introduced to a QuickTime event. Here, the player will be given certain buttons to press in a specific sequence with countdowns for each button. It will seem as the player can defeat the agent, but the scene will get exponentially more difficult and he will cause the player to lose. As a result, the agent will knock him out and send him flying out the window. As he falls through the sky, the woman's voice will indicate that the mission has failed. Again, the tunnel of light appears and the main character goes through flashbacks demonstrating that he has gone through intensive training in special time warp abilities. The character suddenly appears in Miami and the woman's voice informs the player that New York has failed and that he has been sent to destroy this newly installed Grid in this city. Miami was the second city to implement the Grid after New York. This event occurred 7 years before the main character's presence. He feels dizzy and disoriented after appearing at a secluded beach, and he realizes that he doesn't even know who he is anymore. Time travel disrupts memory segments of the brain, and the main character exhibits this sensation throughout the game in the form of a blurry screen, slowly getting focused after seconds pass. When the player accesses the HUD map this time, something's different. A new red zone has appeared and is slowly decreasing in size. This red zone is called the Grid's detection zone, and it has been activated because it has picked up two of the same DNAs in the city, the main character's younger self and himself, and the Grid considers them a threat. A game clock will appear and a countdown will commence. The clock will also have an alert gauge that will increase as the Grid pinpoints the main character's location. This countdown will always be visible at the top right of the screen, and when it reaches 0, the Grid will send all reinforcements to the player and will capture him. The HUD map also indicates both objectives and sub-objectives. When either are selected, a list detailing the objectives will appear. The benefits for finishing main objectives or sub-objectives will be rewarded differently. If a player finishes a sub-objective, they will be rewarded with an expansion of energy capacity. Finishing main objectives will unlock a new time warp ability for the player to use at a future time. Visually, the player will be able to examine what abilities are available by looking at the energy bar. This bar is composed of two areas, the abilities gauge and the energy ray. Each ability requires a certain amount of energy. Therefore, it is extremely beneficial for the player to complete sub-objectives to expand the energy ray. The energy bar will always be located at the top left of the screen. The expansion of the energy ray will allow a player to use the abilities they have available more frequently to help them complete main objectives on each level. To complete the ultimate main objective, the player will have to go through the organizational structures of the inner workings of the Grid. The first level will take place in a near-future setting where Miami is a glass metropolis full of holographic sensory indicators at access points, and the city has an overall dark, depressive feel full of greenish-gray tones that are clearly visible to emphasize the dominance of the Grid over its citizens. Apart from the Grid's continuous control, there are enemy agents on each level with different patrolling speeds that will challenge the player to act quickly. The first level enemies are police agents that patrol the city for any anomalies that may arise. These enemies will be in lightweight standard police uniforms and will be wearing sunglasses. The main character will have to confront a high-level employee and take him down by using his blink ability, which teleports the player to a nearby location instantly. He will then steal his DNA using a mosquito mech and gain access to the corporate offices. Inside the building, guarded by slightly armored soldiers, he will proceed through various floors and locate the CEO by using a hacking mechanic. It consists of rotating diodes and connecting electricity, and it will allow the player to infiltrate into the security system and steal the CEO's DNA. Once in his office, the main character will locate an EMP and take it to the defensive firewall servers. All floors of the building will exhibit the same glass theme of the exterior, but have a blue and white lighting that resemble the Grid Corporation's logo. The EMP that has been obtained must be activated inside the warehouse that contains the servers to destroy them and leave the Grid vulnerable. The level will be in pale shades of blue, brown, and white, and will be full of obstacles such as doors and equipment that will need to be removed by using an advanced ability in the game called Object Warp. This is done by focusing the character's energy on an object and sending it into the past, causing the object to be removed from the present. Apart from using this ability constantly, the player will need to avoid medium armored soldiers that will have uniforms in the same colored theme as their surroundings. The final objective will be inside the Grid's core, where the main character will have to insert a virus that will create an infinite number of pluralities and will cause the Grid to overheat and be destroyed. This level will be themed in a dark green and brown shades, and will have electricity flowing through circuit board walls with blinking lights everywhere. Here, the enemies will be heavily armored and will have different style masks and helmets depending on what part of the core they are patrolling. The player must reach the final chamber of the Grid's core. As he approaches it, he uses his Object Warp to send a temporal shockwave that disrupts the locking mechanism of the impenetrable door. The Grid sets off the alarms and sends every single guard to the player's location. With the virus in hand, he rushes towards the core, knowing the time was running out. He locates the port and inserts the virus, and the upload process begins. He uses his freeze ability to have enough time to block the only entrance he's aware of. As the process reaches 100%, he turns around and inserts the executable code to disperse the virus. As the last key is pressed, he hears a sliding door open. Unaware of its location, he attempts to turn around. Suddenly, the sound of a shot silences the room. He looks down and notices the wound, piercing his left lung and striking a vital artery. Losing his balance, he slowly shifts his weight towards the right and plummets to the ground. With one last breath, he sees the figure of a person walking towards him. As he approaches him, he begins to recognize the figure of a woman. With his eyes almost closed, his memory suddenly returns by the sight of her face. It was her, the woman that had been keeping him safe throughout the journey. It was the love of his life, the mother of his child. This was the last thought that would ever cross his mind, as his heart took one final beat. She hesitantly approached the dead body of the intruder. As she creeped closer and took a look at his face, she lost strength and her knees buckled as she fell to the ground and screamed at the top of her lungs. We thank you for your consideration and hope you consider our proposal.